Hey, it's the Fatboy Show on RX Radio. How are you doing today? Today's what is today's Liberation Day? Liberated. Do you feel liberated, Olive?
As in by the NRM government?
Because that's the reason for the day, isn't it?
Yes.
It was a day created to celebrate the day the NRM took over Kampala.
You know, as someone that was born after the liberation happened, I do not really know if I'm liberated because whatever my parents said or whatever my parents experienced before I was born that needed us to be liberated as a country, I didn't experience it. So I don't know. I don't feel liberated. I just feel like a Ugandan that lives in a country where there is corruption, where there are leaders who don't want to stop ruling.
Okay, well, I was a child when the NRA took over. So I think I was about 11 years old, and obviously I wasn't living here at the time. But even from the stories I would hear, if you were to think of life at that time and life now, you could argue it's slightly worse.
I know, but you see, you had the stories at the time. I had the stories years later. I mean, when I started understanding what politics is all about, like 10 years later.
Because if the argument is, Obote used to arrest political opponents, or I mean, in Amin's era, people used to disappear. Well,
and
should I?
You want to go there?
Exactly, because if you measure based on that, I mean, so many people have been disappeared.
Exactly.
In the last few years.
Just the other day, this week, Kabuleta was petitioning for. He was asking government to present 32 missing persons, and I've had stories of families that have lost people that have never been seen again. Of course, we've also had stories of people that used to go to Nalfenya and that some of them never used to come back. But those are stories that on record government says those things didn't happen. So it's hearsay.
What about, what is it they say? Was it called Pandagari? Where people would be bundled upon...
Wasn't that during the Obote era?
Yes.
Yeah.
And apparently... the former ethics minister, Dr. Nsaba Butiro, was the guy handling Kampala at the time under the previous government. And I remember him being criticized for that. So, I mean, that was a huge deal. Oh, they would just bundle you up. Well, excuse me.
And today we have the same thing happening.
You have the drones.
With the drones,
You have the drones and they bundle you up and take you away to places you don't even know.
Yeah, so it depends on which side of the coin really you are at. But today people are still disappearing. We see stories in the newspaper. NUP is known for, making so much noise about the same. Though, of course, government says that they expand the numbers. They make it look like the people missing are so many. But then how should we know? How would we know that the numbers they are giving us are not actually correct?
But it's the same because Obote would say the same thing. I mean, so who are those people? Where are the reports? I mean, and that's just how it's just full of gray areas. But economically speaking, one has to wonder if there had not been a disruption of the economic growth due to a civil war that was launched by the current president. I mean, it's one thing to say, Uganda didn't develop in the 80s. Well, whose fault? Do you know
partly the incumbent's fault.
Exactly, because if he had conceded the results of the 1980 elections and just said, okay, maybe I'll work with the new government or maybe I'll just retire from politics and do my own thing. And if the Obote government had been left to essentially carry out its agenda, including things like the Northern Bypass project, which apparently was
supposed to happen then.
Yes, it was developed by that previous government, but it was too busy trying to stave off a rebellion courtesy of...
I've actually seen stories over the years that say that some of the infrastructure, the major infrastructure like roads and hospitals we have in this country were actually made or, developed during the Obote era.
Yeah, and many of the blueprints for the projects that are being implemented now, including the Northern Bypass, were developed by that government. So my point is, obviously they're going to take credit for the growth that we have since seen, which is kind of debatable. But are you telling me that if there had not been another government that we would not have Acacia Mall?
We would.
And we wouldn't have, I don't know, what other symbols of development?
Actually, Metroplex, and we would have those things because which family owns Acacia Mall? Is it the Aga Khan family?
I think it's the Madvanis.
The Madvan family, and it goes back to the 70s. If Uganda didn't grow back then, it started with of course the expulsion of Indians that stalled our economy for years.
Yeah, that too. Okay, so the NRM invited back the Asians.
The Asians, yes.
Was a good thing. But I have a feeling even Obote would have over time. You don't think? I think the Indian community would have kept lobbying the government.
Because during his government, they were here and they were thriving. Then, of course, Amin took power and expelled them out of the country. So all we are saying is that we cannot really say that this government is responsible for everything that we have today. Some of them were supposed to happen with or without.
Yeah, and for even though they desire to take credit for a lot of what has happened, I think it'll be lost on the younger people. Perhaps older people may be open to appreciating the change. But for younger people who have only known of this regime and this way of life, they're going to keep thinking to themselves, maybe we deserve better.
That's why I said in the beginning that I don't have a recollection of what happened because I was born shortly after NRM took over power. Not that I'm very young, but then there are people younger than me that don't even have parents who experienced that. Like my son. The next election, my son will be voting. He will be 18.
Can you imagine?
And he doesn't know anything else. So you cannot bring those stories. He won't understand. He won't relate. At least me, I can relate a bit because my mom was there. My dad was there. Some of my older siblings were there. But my son, what does he have to
No, I mean,
to?
I remember the roadblocks. The few times I would visit Uganda, I remember the roadblocks. And obviously, there wasn't as much development. I mean, the difference between now and then, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of buildings, the size of the cities, not that I should give specific credit to this government. I just think it was just a natural progression of population growth and economic activity.
Okay,
we would have an argument could be made that we might even be in a better position than we are now. Perhaps our economy could have been rivaling that of Kenya.
Maybe.
If it had been left intact and been left
and there wasn't a civil war for 5 years that, claimed the lives of about 500,000 Ugandans.
Yeah. So, and not even assigning blame as to who killed more or what, but you have to agree.
People died.
People died and the war was disruptive.
And the economy, stalled for all those years. So it took us so much time to recover from that and then start building again. And of course, with that also came leaders that are corrupt, leaders that have their own personal interests vis-a-vis those of their people. So we don't grow.
But
seriously,
you know what? I'll tell you.
Look around in East Africa, away from Rwanda. Look at Kenya. Look at Tanzania. Which other East African country? Look at Burundi. I don't know so much about Burundi, but let's look at Kenya and Tanzania. When you compare those economies to ours, they are way ahead.
True. Way ahead.
Even the politics. They have politics every 5 years and they change leaders.
That's one thing we can't boast about for sure, especially today, where we're marking 37 years of the same president.
The same president, the same ministers. Do you know Moses Ali has been a minister, I think, since Amin's time or even before that?
Really?
Like, how does that make sense? The guy is in parliament dozing and he's a minister. And I'm not saying he doesn't have achievements. Maybe he has achievements, but if our leaders came, because according to the official age of our president, he was about 45 when he became president. So it means that there are other able 45-year-olds that can't do what he has done for the last 35 years.
Well, his son is 48.
And
so maybe it's his time.
Maybe it is his time.
Well, enjoy your Liberation Day. Who knows? You're probably just going to be sleeping in and watching series. And,
as some of us are here.
Some of us are here
Life
toiling.
Isn't fair.
But that's just how it is. But we're happy to be here and to have these conversations. So keep watching us on YouTube if that's where you're enjoying this program from. Or keep listening to us here on your number one station, RX Radio.